So I came across a recent interview that the three of you guys have done. I forgot the name of the show, but this is like less than a month ago, or maybe a little bit more than a month ago. And this one caught me by surprise, where you actually gave me a shout out for me sending you the email early, before the start of the show when you guys recorded.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So when I heard that actually like really caught me because I didn't realize the you know I always take it upon myself, just make sure you get it done early so get it out of the way, so that way they don't have to worry about reaching back to you. Hey, you
yeah,
forget, so. But when you had said that, and considering, because I was listening to what you do, because I've listened to stuff before, you've talked about how busy things get and how much work is involved in putting the show together and whatnot. But actually listening to that little segment right there made me realize more the amount of work that it's also involved, where you have to more or less chase people, say, hey, can we get the segment here? Because I'm putting the pieces together right now and I'm still waiting on you.
yeah,
So hearing that, I was like, oh, because this is something that I didn't realize the extent of, like how some certain areas that I may have taken for granted that can be rather difficult, which are the most simplest things that I've come to realize that I should know too, but just listening from other people's perspective and the grand scale that you do it here, actually made me appreciate more the hard work that everyone, especially yourself, because you're the guy that pretty much puts it all together here.
yeah.
So, the thing is that I think one thing that I always take a great liking to is someone who has, because I've listened to you talk on more than one occasion, obviously on the show, but the thing that I always find consistent about you is that you always seem to maintain a pretty even keel about yourself. And, despite the amount of work that you're putting into with what you're doing for the show. And then, I mean, you've talked before about how you've actually been opening up more a little bit about how you're looking into getting some therapy. Because not to say I was not that I was surprised to hear that, but I was curious about how, if all the amount of work that you've done at some point, if you probably either neglected or just didn't take the time to consider the amount of stress this work has involved, which eventually led for you to seek out help elsewhere. Because that's the part that I was actually completely unaware of. And I'm wondering if it's in relation to the amount of work that you carry to put everything together, and then having to find the time to take care of yourself in other areas that you may have never considered looking into, where you're now focusing on that to be able to find some sort of middle ground to keep your composure during those stressful times where maybe you didn't handle as well before, but maybe you're handling it better now. So I hope that's a good way to start the conversation, because I'm curious to see how your perspective on that is here now, considering how things have been going for you so far.
Yeah, well, first, I'm glad that you saw the clip where I said that I love that you send me the segments early, because I really, it's like, I love everybody that works on GHR, right, that takes their time, especially like, and I'm talking, I obviously love Kim and Brim,
right,
and I also apologize if there's like a little bit of an echo. Like, we're still building our home studio, so it's a little cavernous in here, but obviously I love Brim and Kim because I've been working with them forever. But you, Jen Wild, Lee Kwai Lau, Amy Winters, like everybody that puts in their time to put in a segment for GHR, I really appreciate it, because none of you have to do it. Like, you know what I mean? You do it because you want to do it, and I appreciate that. And what I appreciate about you is it is never me asking. Like, literally, it's there before we even record the show on Mondays, and it's good content. You know what I mean? So I always just, and it's well produced. So I always just really appreciated that, because it makes my life a little bit easier. But as far as like the therapy stuff goes, I appreciate you also saying that I come off as very even keel, because, sometimes I don't really feel like that, for a really long time. I struggled with, a lot of feeling very down about myself, not feeling very highly of myself. And, when you're working, and then inevitably when you're working GHR, I've been working at GHR, I've been helping build GHR for the last like 7 years.
Yeah.
So it becomes very mundane, and it becomes very like
monotonous. Yeah.
Monotonous. Like, you're going through the same thing over and over. Yeah. And then, we have and kind of the thing that kind of set it over the edge for me was about a year ago now. I might even be getting close to, it'll probably be 2 years in next October. Zambo left.
Yeah.
And that left for the most part, all of the production was left on me. And, me and Zambo were pretty close. We were very similar personalities. We're very similar people. And it was like, a friend left me. You know what I mean? Like a friend that I was really close with, that I loved working with, just up and left. And then I was left with with the fallout. You know, we were all left with the fallout, but I was
Yeah.
left with the fallout to clean up a lot of the pieces. So, you know, it got a little difficult, and you know, to be honest with you, it's something that I still struggle with. You know what I mean? It's like you're a part of something for 7 years. You're part of something for 7 years, something that's you're very passionate about for 7 years, and then it totally changes, and you're sitting there looking around like, wow, this doesn't really feel like how it used to. You know what I mean? This doesn't feel like this vibe that we cultivated over the last 7 years, or at least 6 years before this one that we've had without Steve. It doesn't feel the same, you know, and it's working through that to try to find the new things to make the show feel like it did, while also feel like it's progressing. It gets kind of difficult from time to time. You know what I mean? Because you know, it can be a lot of work. I literally edit and put together everything. I got to engineer the show. I got to engineer the shows that we rent our studios. I got to engineer some of the shows that come in and rent our studios. So it was a lot of work when Steve left, and when I've already been battling kind of the self-doubt and the negative thoughts about myself. You know, it was natural that I was like, you know what, finally I'm going to make the jump, and, you know, I'm going to talk to somebody, and I'm going to be my own advocate and try to treat myself better. And, you know, it's worked. It's definitely helped. I try to tell everybody now, if you feel like you need any help, you should definitely seek it, because it's becoming more and more of a thing that, taking care of your mental health is really important. And it should be, you know, at some point, in my personal opinion, it should be like going to the doctor. You know what I mean? You go to your doctor to get your checkups. You go to your dentist to get your fillings. I feel like somebody should be able to consult like a therapist, just to be like, hey, make sure your brain's okay, because your mind basically, your mind affects how you perceive the world and how you go through the world.
You know, it's funny because not funny, but you mentioned before about Zambo leaving here, because there is actually, because, you know, for anyone that doesn't know, you have a new show on YouTube now. It's Hi, It's Tom, which I remember when I first heard it, I literally thought that it was just a Hi, It's Tom. That was kind of like the intro, but no, that's the name of the show, which I thought was
Hi, I'm Tom.
fun. Yeah. Oh, Hi, I'm Tom. Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
That's okay.
So when you talked about that real briefly for a good bit, because about Zambo leaving, or Steve leaving, I should say, because I was actually kind of surprised about it too. But here's the thing, it was one of those things where I was glad that you shed some light on it, because one of the things I was completely unaware of is that apparently there was, because you said in that show where you had talked about how people had gotten the impression that it was because of you, Steve had left, and that was not the case. And then you clarify what had happened, more or less, to kind of give people some peace of mind, if you will, about what happened. And you guys are still friends, you had said before too in that episode. But it's I think you know, because again, when I had listened to the show over 2 years ago now, if I recall correctly, yeah, you're right. There was definitely a consistent thing that had occurred, and then once he had left, I did notice a shift, but I never felt like, if, you know, for a lack of a better term, the magic was lost, because the relationship and the bond was still there. So I never felt like that had ever left the show, but you can clearly tell there was something that was missing. And I guess, you know, for some people, it may be considered just the fact that he was always been there, and then all of a sudden, now that he's not, I notice now when you're telling me now about the amount of work that you're doing, I'm not gonna lie, I think there's certain parts of certain episodes where I listen, I was like, hey, he seems a little down today, you know, like those little things here and there that I'm listening to that I recall. But here's the thing that I was really curious about with you, because of that shift that had occurred, where once Steve had left, and then you had taken up a lot more responsibility. I'm actually curious about how, if you ever felt, I'm not saying that you felt like leaving, but if you ever felt like, I don't think I want to do this right now at all, because this is overwhelming. I can't deal with this. And I'm sure you've talked with Brim and Kim about this as well too. But I mean, expressing your concerns about the amount of work that you, and I'm sure everyone else had to deal with here, but primarily you, where you realize that this is too much for me right now, and I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Have you ever come to that kind of that point of that thought process where you realize that enough's enough right now for me?
You know, yeah. And I just want to, you know, I'm actually I'm very thankful for the work that I get to do. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always somebody that's never satisfied. Like, I try to take my breaks and try to take my time to just relax and unwind. But if I'm not doing something, I feel like I should be doing something, so I'm very thankful for the work that I get to do. But no, you're right. It does become a little stressful from time to time, especially when it is the same thing I'm doing week after week. And you're right. Yeah, 100%. We've been doing this for 7 years, and I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you over those 7 years, I didn't have those thoughts of being like, you know what, I think it's time I step away. It's like, I equate it to, I've never been in a band. I've never been in, I was never into music or anything like that, but I'd imagine it's very similar. You guys, everybody's working together for so long. At some point, it's like, man, do I want to be doing this forever? Or do I have to go out and do something else? Like, I've been doing the same thing for so long. Do I got to go out and do something else? So no, yeah, I've definitely had those thoughts of being like, maybe it's time to walk away because it just doesn't feel the same to me. Because again, like for a while, it was like, in the beginning, it was Brim, Kim, Zambo, and then me and my friend Scott Eisenberg, who does Shoot the Flick with his wife. Anybody listening, go check that out. They do a great show where they talk about movies. We were interns. Like, we were just editing celeb drops. We were editing the show, and we were just sitting in, like, taking notes and stuff like that. And then I got an on-air role as I was there more. So then it was the four of us, and it was great. It was a really nice chemistry. It was really fun. Me and Zambo could bounce off each other, and that was fun. And, it was great. Like, we all just had a one cohesive family. And then that happened. Zambo left, and again, speaking personally and candidly, like, you felt the shift. You felt a emotional, and you felt for a little while even you felt the tension because it was like, Zambo left. It's somebody off the editing team. It's a personality off the show that's been there from the beginning. There were some things behind the scenes that kind of happened that kind of sucked. And yeah, all of that in total, and especially after Zambo leaving and like leaving all the editing work on me, which again, I'm not complaining about. It's not brain surgery I'm doing here. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that, it's really not that bad. It was more or less just me missing working with a good friend of mine. You know what I mean? And, when you're working in a business, especially those friendships, they get very tense. You know what I mean? Like, it's really easy to be friends with somebody outside of, just a casual friend where you go hang out every once in a while, go grab a drink and stuff like that. But when you're business partners and you're working in a business, it can get very tense, and it still does. You know what I mean? In between me, Brim, and Kim, it still does. But especially after Zambo left and you felt that paradigm shift. And it is very funny that you said that you'll notice if you listen when I sound down, because I bring that up to Kim and Brim all the time. I'm like, guys, look, I know I sound down, and I'm sorry, and I'm trying to work through it and stuff like that. Cause you got your moments, but, I know I just went on a long diatribe, but no, in short, yes, there have been plenty of times where I've been like, is this still where I should be, or should I be doing something else? Which is also where the idea for the Hi, I'm Tom podcast came from, because I was like, I need to do something else that's fun for me. Yeah. And I always like talking sports, and I'm not necessarily saying that the podcast is going to be all sports all the time, but I was like, I just want to be able to ramble and talk for however long I want. So I'll just do my own little YouTube channel and, see what happens.
It's funny you said that, because I remember when you had first announced on your social media post, when you said, I'm going to, starting my own show, it's, talk about sports. The first thing I remember thinking right away is that this is where his bread and butter is at. Because when I listened to you in the segments, I was like, to me, that's where you shine the most. Because obviously, because for anyone who doesn't know, you're extremely passionate about, baseball is your favorite sport. Then you have football. And I think you said hockey's after that.
Yep.
And not a big fan of NBA. I'm trying to think what else you said you
also. No, that's it. No, I'm a big baseball. I'm a huge Mets fan, Giants fan, Islanders fan, and I've been kind of breaking into basketball a little bit more. Because I love competition. So, I just watch basketball from time to time.
Well, and the reason I'm pointing out is because, when I listen to those segments on GHR, that's, to me, that's where you come alive. Not to say that you're not animated when you're doing this, the show, I meant to say, but it's really during those moments, right? And I was like, this is where he needs to be at. Because I remember, I think it was like 6 months ago, if I remember correctly, hearing you talk, and sometimes even then you were like, you would say, "I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I can hear that passion." So when you started that show, right away, I know this is going to be great because I knew that that's where you're going to shine the most. And I actually thought you got better and better because so far there's been 4 episodes that's dropped. I thought you got better and better each and every episode.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, I mean that too. But you've gotten better. But what I also noticed too is that um, I noticed that I don't know what's the best way. What's the best way I could say this here? I noticed that the level of stress that well, when I listen to GHR, whenever I hear that down moment you had, I don't get that at all from that show. Is what I'm saying. So I think that's really where you're most excited for a number of different reasons, which I'm picking up on here. But you let me know if I'm right. You just said it before that a new endeavor here, and therefore you have almost like a new shot of life. And at the same time, you're talking about what you truly do love, which is sports. And that last episode where you talked about the Giants, pretty much the entire episode, which I thought was great, by the way.
Thank you.
So I got to see, in a weird way, more or less the real you. If that's it's not the best way for me to say it, but I got to see who you were, because when you were mad, it was obvious you were very mad. But when you were happy, it was extremely obvious that how happy you were, to the point where I thought that, I remember at one point I was thinking too, if, not to say this is going to happen, but if GHR were to shut down one day, I could see this being more like the gateway where, like, I love what you did with GHR, but man, you really shine here. Would you like to work with us in this capacity to do the following things regarding sports? Because your shit. So that's something that I more or less can see, that if they ever come to a point where GHR would ever shut down, which I hope it doesn't, but if it were, that's the path I see you taking here, because I really think that's where you are going to excel in an area that you've been passionate for pretty much your whole life, from what I'm understanding here.
Yeah.
And excel on that even further from where you are right now. So that's me giving your flowers in that respect here.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. And I mean that too. But you're welcome though. But I think what I was trying to also start off with that too is because I wanted to get into that here, but I want to delve into them a little bit more. But what I really want to get back to real quickly about that is that you had said something before that I find extremely interesting, which is the fact that you guys had tense moments between yourselves where business more or less kind of caused the wedge between you guys to a certain extent, but somehow you guys were able to overcome that. Obviously, the situation with Steve you mentioned before, which I'm not asking to reveal anything here, but I'm curious about the difference between that particular situation with Zambo leaving, but yet how all three of you guys, you, Brim, and Kim, have been able to maintain that relationship despite those hurdles you guys have to go through that maybe didn't work as well when it came to how the relationship between the initial four of you guys, one leaving, and then you guys still staying behind despite those wedges you may have from time to time, and learn to be able to overcome that. Because I think some people don't truly understand that differences come into play, but if you're honest with each other, I think it does come out better. But if you're honest with each other and take the time to listen to each other, I think that's even better too. Yeah. But I'm curious about what your perspective on that is, because I don't think, I've never got the impression from any of you guys that you guys would ever have any sort of wedge between you where it may have caused you guys to step away from each other and then maybe reconsider certain things and then come back and say, you know what, it's okay. We'll work through this here. But again, it's a long question, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. I think it's just because, like for a while, Zambo leaving was a little, it sucked. It was hard. It was a little contentious because it was just, like I said, there was some behind the scenes stuff that just got a little difficult, and we had to handle like tech stuff and storage stuff. Like there were some things that we had to work through. But it made, for a while, it made some of us be like, all right, no, we're going to try to, go full force ahead. We're going to make this better. We're not going to let this stop us, and we're going to keep going, but like I said, like any relationship, because that's what it is. There's contentious moments, and we got to talk it out. We got to talk it out. We got to air it out. We got to figure out what are we going to do for the best interest of the show and the company moving forward, because while things do get contentious and, you know, like anybody that's in a business like this where you're grouped together trying to create something, and you know, again, it's like a band. You know what I mean? Heads are going to butt, personalities are going to clash, and opinions are going to clash because we're three different people trying to put something together, you know?
Right.
And, you know, so you know, I think it's just whenever things get hard, we do our best to try to work through them and try to just put the best show possible out, you know, through any situation that we're kind of going through. You know what I mean? Because like, you know, again, when you're doing, it's hard for me to say this because I say when you're doing something for as long as we've been doing it, it gets kind of difficult because again, it just becomes mundane, it becomes routine, and you got to find ways to change it up. You know, but in the same token, you know, Elvis Duran has been doing his show for 1 billion years. Howard Stern's been doing his show for 1 billion years. Yeah. So why can't we do GHR and continue to evolve and adapt? You know, so it's very much it's a very delicate situation because it's trying to make sure that we can all mesh together well after we had a very integral piece taken from us. And in some cases, I think we're still trying to find that perfect balance to make the show feel different than what it used to feel, because it's never going to be the same. Like we acknowledge that from Jump Street when he left, that this show is not going to be the same because there's just going to be a different vibe. It's one less personality. We have to just find a way to make that work. We need to find a way to make it work, and we need to find a way to make it better still, you know? So I hope that kind of sort of answers your question.
It does. It does. Yeah. So then this leads me then into, you know, moving into, because you touched before about starting your own show. So once you started doing, because the first episode, I remember, like, I'm not sure if you were, because I think you may have said it too, if I recall correctly, you seemed a little nervous about doing this, because you're used to working with other people in that capacity, and now you're on your own. You're having to figure out that rhythm, and then once you kind of got, which I noticed before, like I said, each episode got better because you've got that rhythm down to a point where you realize that, you know, you're able to kind of go off on a tangent, which is not only just entertaining, but it was also very informative too. Because, you know, I don't follow sports mostly through my peripherals, but to hear from someone else that is very invested in hearing how they talk about it, that's the one aspect about the show that I truly do appreciate. But the thing is that as you started doing the show, and as I said before, you got better with it. I'm wondering if you have felt like, if you noticed a change in yourself that made you feel like, okay, I've come to a point in myself right now where I realize that either I'm okay, that I can still do this, or I like this path that I'm taking right now, and this is just something else for me to not necessarily vent out, but to express myself in an area that I don't necessarily may have the opportunity to do it here, but I can do it here, and therefore when I go back to this, I don't have that stress anymore.
Yeah, you know, you're right. I at least in the first episode, it was a little rough simply because I'd never done a solo show before. I'd always had, even back to my time at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, I never really did a full solo show. So I'd never, you know, I call myself crazy because I talk to myself all the time. You know, I think I've seen quotes before saying that geniuses do that. So I like to, you know, all right, I'll take that. But no, I did the show, and it was definitely a little scatterbrained. I felt like it was. I didn't really have a plan, and now, you know, I got my notebook next to me, and if I have ideas that I want to just talk about, I'll jot them down and, you know, go through them on the show. But I wanted it to be, because when I'm doing GHR, it can feel pressurized. You know what I mean? I have a lot of people's, like, it's not just me. I'm responsible for how Brim sounds. I'm responsible for how Kim sounds. I'm responsible for how your segment sounds. I'm responsible for how all the other side segments sound when they fire, you know, and sometimes you feel that pressure. I'm responsible for when the ads play and when we got to hit our sponsors that pay us money for some of this stuff. You know what I mean? So, you know, you feel the pressure of GHR sometimes. And it was nice to come up with my own show where I didn't have that. You know what I mean? I strictly, am I saying that I wouldn't want my YouTube channel to become something bigger than what it is right now? Of course I do. I'd love to see some growth, but in reality, I took my YouTube channel and I took this show as a way for me to just kind of reset and do what I love, which was just sitting behind a microphone and rambling for a little while. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I tried to take as much of the pressure off of me as humanly possible. And I was just like, you know what? This isn't going to be successful right away. And the term successful really is subjective because it depends. Like, you can measure success on a bunch of different scales. You know what I mean? Like, if my YouTube channel never got monetized, does that mean I'm not successful? No, I mean, not necessarily. If there's people that listen, if I get views, likes, comments, whether those comments are telling me that I had Steve kicked off of GHR or not, which I didn't, which was hilarious. I would consider it a success, so that's kind of, and I wanted it also to try to rekindle the spark that I once had. I looked at podcasting and I looked at radio as just like, as this really cool job and opportunity to connect with people and put out your own content, because I grew up listening to Opie and Anthony, Elvis Duran. I grew up listening to WFAN sports talk radio. In fact, I still do, like every day for the most part. And I always loved that. And I was like, okay, so I have a microphone, I have an interface, I have an internet connection, I have a computer. I can just go to my house, sit down, ramble for an hour, maybe 45 minutes if I want, and just put it out and see what people think, with no pressures, nobody telling me what I got to do, how to do it. I just do it how I want to do it and put it out and just see what happens.
So the question for me is that, because you talked about how you would like to see the show become successful, but is that really the end game, or is it just more really kind of playing it by ear and doing something that helps you to go through the process and helping you alleviate some of the stress? Because clearly you are good at what you do. I truly do believe that, but it's all, well, you're welcome, but I think it's also in a lot of ways too kind of therapeutic as well, because again, you touched upon about how you do this here, alleviate the stress, and you go back to GHR and you're like, okay, now I can, I'm more collected now. But initially when you first started doing that, did you have that kind of goal in mind about, I want this to be successful, or is it just really coming from a spot where I just need to release some stress and we'll see what happens after this point?
It's kind of a little of both.
Okay.
I wanted it to, I'd like it to be something. I would like it to be something that gets a little bit of traction and people watching, commenting, and interacting with me. I would love that. Yeah, of course. And also, in the same token, other side of the coin, I love it, the fact that I can just put something out on my own accord, how I want to do it, and put it out and just, like you said, therapeutically. It's no pressures, nobody telling me how to do it, what I got to do, what I got to talk about. It's literally just all me. What comes off the dome, I put out and let the world see, So I think it's both. I would love for it to be successful with all these interactions, but I also, in the same vein, like that I don't have to, stress really about it. I could literally just come up with a few things to talk about, sit and ramble for, again, like I said, 45 minutes to an hour, put it up and, be good about it, not really worry about it.
You also mentioned before that, eventually you may consider get into other topics as well too. So what kind of other topics are you considering looking into outside of sport that would pique your interest to bring onto the show?
I haven't put too much thought into it. Okay. Maybe talk about some, like, I love video games, maybe talk about some stuff in the gaming world, or maybe still talk about pop culture stuff or any random articles that I find online, maybe. But I mean, I'm a sports fanatic. I have to say that I let sports affect me emotionally more than I absolutely should, so, the episode that you mentioned where I was talking about the Giants, I did as a Giants reaction because, that's my football team.
Yeah.
I had to wait a few hours to actually do that show, because if I would have did it after the game, I would have been peeking all over the place. I would have been screaming. I would have been losing my mind, over the moon that they beat the Ravens, so, sports is kind of where I'm centered right now, where I'm kind of comfortable, because it's just something I've always wanted to talk about and always wanted to just create content for. But I'm kind of, like I said, I'm leaving the channel itself open to no pressure. I'm going to do whatever I want. If I want to sit down and I want to, record myself playing video games with my friends and throw it up there, I'm going to do it. I'm going to just use it as a forum to, let loose and put out whatever content I see fit, whatever content I want to do.
When you started cutting into GHR, I mean, obviously, I think the general consensus from everybody was that, we didn't know where the show was going to head to, and then eventually became successful, and it grew from there, and has garnered a following. But as time has gone by, obviously you've had a lot of the ups and downs that come with that business here, and then we talked about some of the other internal hurdles that you all had gone through here. But when you think about how you first were coming into that at that time, obviously you were a different person there, but when you think about how you were getting into it here, do you feel like that you have grown in some ways, probably to become, I don't know if maybe this is the best way to ask you, but become a better person? And what I mean by that is that you look at yourself and you started learning the business, you learn the ins and outs, you understand how the engine works, and then you also understand the relationships that is developed through that, and how to network, how to maintain those relationships, how to build a good reputation. And then as time has gone by, I'm wondering if your perception about yourself has changed, where you feel like, I think I've gotten better because of what I've been through. And I became to a point, because even now, as we just talked about earlier, that you realize that, okay, I've hit a roadblock and I've got to be able to find a way to help myself through that. But, 7 years ago, maybe that thought process would have never crossed your mind at that point if you had that roadblock occurred that early on in the career. So I'm curious to see how you view yourself now from when you were back then.
Yeah, I definitely a lot better. I definitely feel like the years that I've spent at GHR helped me feel a little bit more confident talking behind a mic and voicing my opinions, because when I first started at GHR, I wasn't on the mic very little. And then when I did wind up with an on-air role, I used to just pretend like nobody was listening. I didn't really know how early into GHR's infancy I got in. Turns out it was like I had joined maybe a few months, maybe like 6-7 months into GHR's existence. It might have been a little longer, but so I thought I was walking into a well-oiled, finely tuned machine, so I didn't want to mess that up. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to chime in when I can and chime in when I feel like it's necessary, and I'm going to let them do their thing. I don't want to step on any toes. And then as time went on, I also, like, I think one of the things I've said before is I used to pretend like nobody was listening. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pretend nobody's listening, and it'll help me calm down and put less pressure and thought of how I speak. Now, I kind of feel like the time I've spent at GHR has at least let me grow as a person to, while, I don't always feel the greatest about myself, which is where the therapy comes in. I'm confident enough to know that I've been doing this long enough to know that I'm good at it, and that I can be behind a microphone. I can handle myself behind a microphone, and I don't really care what I have to say. I'm just kind of say it and be the most genuine version of myself possible. Like the person you get on GHR, the person you get on the Hi I'm Tom podcast, the person you're getting right now in this interview is literally the exact person you will get if you see me on the street and say hello. You know what I mean? Like, I am no different. I do not put on any acts. I don't put on any faces. I am not an actor. You know what I mean? So, I think, we have had some highs and we've had some lows with GHR, but if I'm looking at all the positives, I would say that it has helped me be more confident as a broadcaster. And I know that some people, I don't necessarily know if they consider podcasting broadcasters, but I would. And anybody that says that they're not, I gotta know what to tell you. But that's probably where I think my biggest jump was that I left CSB thinking I was never going to get a job in radio because everybody kept telling me no. I wasn't fully committed to leaving the state of New York to go build a following in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, um, to come back, so I decided to try to build my voice here. And I think GHR, while it has its good times and it has its bad times, it has very much as a whole helped me uh, gain a confidence behind the microphone that I didn't have before.
Do you see yourself being more, because you talked to before, because you obviously touched about before how you had a lot of moments where you don't think very highly of yourself, but I mean, do you consider yourself being happy despite those moments where seeing the things you've been able to achieve? And I'm not talking just about the GHR aspect of it, but also more like about the relationships you've developed here, and the friendships you've also garnered from this, where if it wasn't for this path you had taken here, who knows, what path you would have been taken up if you hadn't met with Kim and Brim at that point. But then going through the this journey, if you will, if you feel like, if you look back at it yourself now and you think, I've accomplished a lot, and the things I've accomplished here now were not easy, but we've been able to do this here, so I'm happy with it. But do you look at yourself and say, but I'm also happy with myself because of what I've done and because of what I've learned and because of who I am up to this point?
Man, I feel like happiness is such a loaded word. You know what I mean? Because I feel like in one instance, you can be happy with what you did and not satisfied all at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, I am very happy with what GHR has brought me and this path that I took. I've gotten to interview, hang out, speak to in person, interact with and meet so many really awesome people. I've gotten to talk and literally have dinner with one of my voiceover idols, a voice of my childhood, Richard Horvitz.
Yeah.
I literally one of the coolest human beings I've ever met. Sean Schemmel, the voice of Goku, met him. Absolutely phenomenal human being. Charles Martinet, the voice of Super Mario. The video game Super Mario.
Yeah.
Not Chris Pratt. Literally is one of the most genuine, nicest human beings I have ever had the privilege of speaking to. If it wasn't for GHR, I would have never met Kim. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I mean, there are times where I'm not satisfied, where I want more, where I'd like to see more growth and I'd like to see a little bit more progression. But, I think also in those times, you have to realize that it is still a marathon, not a sprint, that there's still a lot of runway ahead. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you can't get too down. You can't get too high and you can't get too down. You know what I mean? You got to just kind of, you can't get comfortable. You got to just appreciate the moment and appreciate how you got to where you came from. You know what I mean? Like, you got to appreciate the work that you put in. Sure. Dude, I stress all the time. It's like, am I where I want to be right now? No, of course not. That'd be crazy. If I literally sat here, I just turned 30 last month. If I just sat here and was like,
happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much. If I just sat here and was like, all right, I made it, I'm where I want to be, that would be absolutely insane. Like, that would literally be the craziest thing in the world. Just being at 30 where I am, being like, okay, this is it, I'm done. No, but am I happy? At times I am, and at times I'm not. It kind of just depends on the situation. I'm happy for the experiences I've had. I'm happy for the work I've put in. I think it's been a lot of hard work. I'm happy for the people I've met, while also still not being content or satisfied with where I am. I'm happy about it, but I want more, and I would like to achieve more and get to higher heights and experience other things.
So with the stories you shared briefly about the various people you got to meet, this is a side that I'm curious to get your perspective on here, because I talked to, Brim shared his stories about the various people he's met, and some good, some bad, some in, a little bit a mixed bag some days, I guess. Kevin, to some degree, has shared that as well too. But I'm curious about your perspective on going through that for yourself the first time, where you actually met somebody that you had grown up with her and listening to their work or watching their work. And then when you met them, obviously you had some great experiences, but when you first started going through more or less down that path and meeting people that you have whose work you respected, and then understanding that side of the business where you've come to realize that the person you see is not the person that they are, or the person that you don't know is actually a better person than you anticipated,
Yeah.
So having gone through that for the first time and then experiencing it almost to a decade at this point, does your perception change a little bit about how you look at people in general, especially in that capacity, but more or less about how you approach people? Because maybe you had expectations, and now those expectations that you had at a certain level maybe were met or more met, but then you realize, remove that and just focus on the moment and focus on the person and see what happens at that point.
In the beginning, I was very in the beginning, like I think my first convention with GHR was the Philadelphia Comic-Con in 2017, maybe 16, 17. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was one of the Philly cons. Okay. And I was very nervous to meet a lot of people. We met some of the Power Rangers. I grew up watching Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And it was very I was very nervous because I was like, who am I? You know what I mean? I'm just at the time I was like, I'm just a mediocre podcaster who's been doing this at the time for maybe about a year or two. Like I wasn't even in it very long. Yeah. It might have even just been a year. I don't really remember. There's been so much, but I remember being very nervous about it and being like, I don't want to offend them. I don't want to come off as weird and stuff. And then as you go along, you kind of just get used to it and you realize that they're just regular people. You know what I mean? It's not, there's no real difference. You know what I mean? Once you pull back the glitz and glamour of what you feel like the entertainment business or the television, radio, movie business is, they're literally just regular human beings.
Right.
So, I obviously, I approach people as respectfully as I can. I kind of just try to feel out the room. I'm like, okay, is this person really going to be receptive to just, having a conversation, or just, shooting the shit for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And if they don't seem approachable, I won't approach them. If they do, I'll, have a conversation. There's really only, I think I talked to Kim about this nowadays. There's really only two people that, I'm actually, no, okay, sorry. It's more than two people. It's a couple of people that if I met today, I would be absolutely starstruck and I wouldn't be able to say anything. It's Will Ferrell. I love Will Ferrell. The cast of It's Always Sunny, because it's my favorite television show of all time. And Danny DeVito. He is the cast of It's Always Sunny, but Danny DeVito specifically, I love all those people. And they're the only ones that I put off to the side. I'm like, if I meet them, I might be a stuttering mess. Everybody else, I just look at your work is great. You're talented at what you do, but you're just like me. You put your pants on one leg at a time the same way I did. You know what I mean? So, I don't feel that same nervous, oh my God, this person's a big movie star. I don't feel that same thing because, they're literally just like you and me. They just happen to be on a television screen or a movie screen every once in a while.
So when you're actually going through the interview process with the guest, whether you meet them at a convention, you converse with them, you have them on the show, do you think that, so for in your perspective, do you think that you have gotten better with the questioning? And because I talked to Kim not too long ago about this, how everyone has chimes in on something, questions are asked, how do you guys coordinate all that, and she kind of gave more or less the approach that you'll have with each other, which is more or less kind of like a feel around, okay, we'll just play it by ear and we'll see how it goes, and then whatever happens. But for yourself, that when you started doing that and asking those questions, how did you feel like you did before in the beginning, and do you think you've gotten better now once you started doing it on a more consistent basis here?
Definitely got better. Definitely got better over time. I have to say that, when I mentioned before that I feel like GHR helped me craft my confidence behind a microphone, the biggest one is interviewing people, because I hadn't really ever done that. All of my experience within radio, I never did the broadcasting club in high school. I think my junior high might have even had it, but I never did that. I used to do pretend radio shows when I was a child at my parents' house, and then at CSB, where we really didn't do many interviews. I think maybe we interviewed like a classmate or something like that, but I never really did it. And in the beginning, it was hard because, to me, I was, again, in the beginning, I was starstruck. I was like, when we would have these people come on, I think there was a time when GHR first started doing guests, and this is the first bit of advice I gave GHR when we first started. We would have like 3 or 4 guests come on in one episode.
Yeah.
Literally, there would be a segment for each guest. And I was like, guys, let's pull the brakes a little bit. The people need to appreciate you, because this is before I was a main host. I was just chiming in every once in a while. I was like, Brim, Kim, and Steve, you guys need to be the front and center of the show. So you need to stop bringing on 4 or 5 guests an episode. And when I would be able to ask questions, it would be a little overwhelming because I would just have all of these people that were in the entertainment business. And I'm like, oh my God, what could I possibly ask them that would be interesting?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of the self-confidence issue. But as time went on, I felt more comfortable just like, asking whatever popped into my head. And I think the thing that I still need to work on and is asking more like in-depth, skirting the edge questions, not necessarily gotcha questions or trying to attack somebody, but trying to get more like personal, like
digging in deep and then pulling out. Yeah.
Exactly. Like more than just the, like I don't want to ask the question of, well, how did you get into the movie business? You know what I mean? Like they've probably been asked that so many freaking times that it's like anybody that's listening to the show has probably heard it ad nauseum.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to be able to ask some hard hitting or, interesting questions rather than the same old ones over and over, so
do you, because I didn't ask this to Kim, but I'm going to ask you, do you do any sort of research to look at what they've done? Because, for example, like I told you before, when we more or less kind of officially started recording, was that one thing that I noticed what I started doing in the beginning was look at all the things that the guests have done, primarily with their work, as far as films, TV, whatever the case may be. And then I would focus on that. Then as time has gone by, I noticed that those questions were becoming very, very similar. And I got bored of them very quickly. But then I started transitioning from that to interviews, because then I was like, they've already asked this question 5 videos ago, and they've asked this question, 2 videos ago. Then I figured out, okay, so I'm going to find what's the most interesting thing to ask them. And to me, that has helped out. But in your end, when you do research, do you do research? And if you do, how do you go about it? And then do you use those that background as far as what you've just found out about the guest to ask those questions based upon with what you discovered there? Because I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure if the questions you would want to ask, because you have a short amount of time with the guests, unless they're in the studio and you have the whole 2 hours, whatever the case may be, and maybe you can kind of filter that out a little bit better. But when you're in there when you have them on for a certain period of time, I would imagine it might be difficult to, okay, I want to ask this question, but Kim's asked this question and Brim's going to ask this question, and now they're going off on a tangent. I have to hold back now. So there's a lot of that. I'm trying to figure out how you go about it in researching, asking, getting to ask a question, and then find a way to kind of weave that in there whenever the opportunity presents itself.
Well, I will peel back the curtain a little bit of GHR and give you a little bit of behind the scenes. There are a lot of times where I have no idea who's coming on until we sit down on Monday. Because I do a lot of the production and putting the show together and editing it, so and post and stuff. Yeah. So and Brim does, Kim does a little, but Brim does a lot of the bookings. Like he does a lot of the bookings of, and like just if anybody's wondering, the team that makes the company of GHR run is me, Kim, and Brim. In the office, like as much as we possibly can, is just us 3. So Kim does a lot of the social medias and the PR and all that stuff. I do the back end editing, engineering, and Brim does the bookings. So there are times where Brim doesn't tell us who's coming on, and I find out on Monday as I'm sitting down to set the show up. I find out on Monday, so I'm like, all right, let me just try to think about it. Sometimes I don't even know. Sometimes I will admit I don't even know who the person is. You know what I mean? So I got to do a quick Cliff Notes, jumping on IMDb or jumping into Google, being like, oh my God, who is this person? And then I'll try to think of some questions, or I'll try to bounce off of an answer that they would have given to a question that Kim asked, or an answer to a question that Brim asked. And while I think it's hard, I think it's also helped because it's helped me kind of think on the fly, because
Adapt, yeah.
my favorite thing in the world is getting a response of like, nobody's ever asked me that, or that, you know what,
Yeah.
that's a good question. That is like a drug to me. Like anytime
That's a confidence booster right there.
anytime
Yeah.
anytime a somebody coming on our show says that, I'm grinning from ear to, nobody can see it because we don't film the show.
Yeah.
But I'm grinning from ear to ear. I'm like, yes, I got him. And not like gotcha, but like, awesome, I got a good question in there. So to answer your question, a lot of the times I do very minimal research, because there are a lot of times where I have no idea who's coming on the show until day of. Like, and what I mean by day of, I mean we're recording in 30 minutes before I find out who's coming on the show. So it's a little bit of it. Like, GHR is a very organized chaos, and it has been since I started.
So how do you go about in handling a guest that, okay, so in this case, so I'm going to try to like put it in a bullet point here. So you have a guest you don't know, but you click with them. Okay, I like what they're getting, what they're about. I like what they're saying. I like the personality. So you have that chemistry in that respect. So that part is easy. But when it comes to a guest, when you don't know who they are, but you are not clicking with them, not because they're bad people, it's just that their response, as Kim was saying, like, some people are like, yes, ma'am, and they're kind of super slow to respond, or they're not offering anything interesting. Now you guys have to find a way to bring up that energy again to kind of get them to keep that momentum going for the show or the segment. So when it comes to that positive side, whereas and maybe it's not the best way to use it, but the negative side, when it comes to a guest that you're not clicking with or just not helping out at all, how do you handle each of those, each side of the spectrum there, positive, negative, and what you have learned in one that has helped you, that you brought over to the negative side of that part of the interview, where you realize, okay, so because of this, I've learned how to do that. So I'm going to bring this over here and see if that works. And then you find out, yes, it does work. So I'm going to stick with this here until something comes up better for me to do it.
That's a really good question. There you go. I gave you one. That's a really good question. So for the ones that are kind of, I don't want to say teeth pulling interviews, because that's really disrespectful to anybody that's come onto the show. I don't want to make it seem like that, but the slower interviews, I actually feel like sometimes those are not better content wise, but better practice wise, because it helps figure out, okay, this worked, this didn't. This person wasn't very receptive to these questions. This kind of question worked, this kind of question didn't. And it kind of helped, because when the person is really slow and not giving us straight answers, it gives us time to ask more questions. You get a lot doing this, where you'll, especially like some good guests that come on, we'll give them a question, and as you know, we only go for 15 minutes. We'll go over sometimes for guests, but we only usually go 15 minutes. They'll go on long diatribes to where I'm looking at Brim and Kim like, reel them in. Come on, we got to reel them in so we can get some more questions in. I think sometimes the slower ones allow us to practice getting out some good questions or good ideas, and testing our interview skills for some of the other better guests. And again, I don't want to better guests is such a harsh word, because I
know exactly what you mean by that.
I appreciate everybody that's coming on to do the show. Anybody that likes that gives their time to come be a part of GHR, I appreciate to no end. So I think in times it's weird to even think about that. Sometimes I feel like the slower interviews and the interviews where we get less out of people almost help prepare us for the bigger interviews, because it allows us to try new avenues to get people to talk or get people to open up, so we have them for the bigger personalities that come on.
So now, you've talked about this before not too long ago with regards to putting the show together, and then Kim has mentioned before too about how guests would say, hey, I said something, but I am not allowed to say that at all. I need you to remove that. So, and she's talked before about how, if they don't let you guys know at a certain time frame and you already have the show out, it's not that you're saying, hey, we've given you opportunity. It's not that we're given that impression, but you're more or less saying, we're depending on you guys to let us know, to tell us in a timely manner, this part, please remove. Otherwise, everything else stays in place.
Yeah.
But with that being said, though, when you're actually having to deal with that, has it ever come to a point where you talk to a guest, everything was great. I mean, the conversation was fantastic, and all of a sudden, that one little part that they need you to take out, that means you have to take out an entire section because everything that led into that one part that they cannot get into here, at least publicly, has to be removed because of that one segment there, and then it kind of kills the momentum, if you will. So I'm wondering how you deal with that, and if how you found a way to be able to weave that together, to splice it up together, to be able to make the interview coherent and at least entertaining for that matter.
I call it the Frankenstein segment.
Okay.
So actually, I don't remember. I'm really mad at myself because I don't remember the kid's name, the person's name or the gentleman's name. It's the new voice of Face for Nickelodeon. Yeah,
I know what you're talking about, but yeah,
yes,
I forgot the name too.
Yes, and if he gets this episode, I very much apologize. It's just my brain is shot today. We brought him on the show to advertise that he was going to be the new face for Nickelodeon, the character face for Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
That's what we billed him on to come onto the show. Guess what he was not allowed to talk about when he came on the show? Being Face from Nickelodeon. So, when that happens, it gets a little difficult because, it doesn't happen very often, to be honest with you. It's only happened a few times where there have been people being like, "Oh, I wasn't allowed to say that. Could you clip it out?" And usually there's a little section of the segment that I cut out. I just shorten it, and it's a little bit shorter of a guest segment. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
In that case, if I remember correctly, I cut a lot of that segment out, a whole lot. So it was very much we got to kind of just live with it. We kind of just got to put it out and see how it gets received. But, I don't want to jeopardize anybody's careers. I don't want to jeopardize anybody's, I don't want to jeopardize their opportunities. I'll take out what you ask, but there is a time, I think even on that episode, I was talking to Brim and Kim and I'm like, guys, this is going to take out the whole segment. We might have to just omit this. Like we might have to take this out and just be 5 segments this week because, if I take out everything of him talking about this, we're going to have 5 minutes of a segment. It's going to be, hello, this is this person. One question and then out. You know what I mean? So I don't know how, it can be difficult, but we just got to make it work. You know what I mean? We do our best, or I do my best to cut around what I have to cut around. And if it's cutting out too much, we got to cut it out. We got to cut the whole segment, and we got to just roll with 5.
So when it comes to, because clearly you guys were aware of this before this was officially announced. So when it comes to getting some inside information, that part, when you started working with GHR, I'm sure there's some things along the way that you guys had found out, especially through Brim, because the amount of people he knows and they've shared with him, and he may tell you, or you find through the grapevine as well too, that XYZ is going to happen, but you got to keep it on the download because this cannot come out for months.
Yeah.
So when you learn about that, when you first were experiencing, those news being you being informed of that, how did you feel about that? And then as time has gone by, what has changed about your perception about once you start receiving those type of news where this is stuff that can't be revealed to the public now, but what's going to happen? Yeah. And how has that changed for you about learning to be able to keep that certain things a secret? Because I'm sure that it does help out a great deal when people say, I let these guys know and they respected this, the secret. So therefore I can trust them. Yeah. And I'm sure that also helps out a great deal too, where maybe somewhere down the line say, hey, because of this, we want to come on the show and be able to speak with you guys to promote the following here. So in that aspect, how have you felt that receiving the news, and then how have you feel about it now, continuing to receive certain news that cannot be revealed, but the consequences, but you also know the benefits of receiving the news because they trust you, knowing that you won't reveal a single thing about what they've already informed you of here.
I think it's a really cool responsibility because it makes me, it's like, wow, that's that's really cool that you trust us with some kind of information like that, because, you know, in most cases, if that information gets out, that opportunity they just told us about is gone. They do not get it, or they go in a different direction, or the opportunity just, or the role goes away, or the opportunity goes away. So the fact that they trust us enough, that anybody would trust us enough to tell us that kind of information is very, it's humbling, and it's very cool, and I feel very privileged to be able to get some of that information. I understood even from an early, even early on, from the beginning of GHR, I understood NDAs. I understand that you can't talk about everything. You know what I mean? Like, I started with GHR after, you know, Marvel had been, you know, already through the Infinity Saga, or not already through, but going through the Infinity Saga, and you already know that, like, you know, the cloak and dagger that Marvel did, where it's like they don't tell you anything. You know, they don't even tell Tom Holland anything because he just blurts it out on television all the time.
Yeah.
You know, so I understood the NDA, and I understood that not everything can be revealed to the public. And when we did start getting a lot of that information, which, you know, it's not a crazy man, we don't get it all the time, but it it was very cool. It was very cool. It was very humbling. I appreciated it, and it made me feel like, okay, cool, you guys do trust us as a show to have this information and not go blabbering out to anybody. Because, like, whether it's on the show or out of the show, personally, if you tell me something and you don't want somebody else to know, I'm tight-lipped. I'm a vault. I'm not going to tell anybody. You know what I mean? Because it's not my business. I'm not gonna, you know, it's not my business to tell the world what this person is doing with their careers, or the moves that these people are making. That's not my business. If you don't want me to say it, I won't say it. You know, that's not, I'm not here. I'm here to be as confrontational free of a content creator as I possibly can, and as much of a respectable content creator as I possibly can. So if you got news that you want to tell me, but you don't want the world to know, I will honor that, and nobody's going to know. I will know, you will know, and anybody else you want to know will know, but I will not tell anybody. You will not hear it from me.
What's the one thing that you were informed of, whether it be from Brim or somebody else that is directly involved with all that, that you revealed something, you realize this is huge, like this is big news? I'm not sure if you're able to tell me, but I'm wondering if you're able to kind of give some insight about what you had received, and when you realize, like, this is something that will blow people away as far as that kind of like secretive news is concerned.
I think the biggest news that I guess I could think of off the top of my head was the whole Mario thing. I didn't know definitively that it was going to be Chris Pratt, but I knew that it wasn't going to be Charles, and I knew the kind of I obviously didn't know the inner workings of all of that, but right. And off the top of my head, that's probably the biggest one I could think of that I can actually say.
Okay.
Because that's obviously out there already. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the world saw the trailer already and heard the announcement that Chris Pratt's Mario. Yeah. So, you know, it's not, I'm not breaking any secrets here.
Right.
But, you know, that was probably one of the bigger ones when we heard that movie was coming, and that Charles, after we had, you know, I'd met him a bunch of times, had spoken to him a bunch of times. Yeah. The guy that's been Mario for the last, like 2 decades.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to be the voice in the movie. That was probably the biggest bit of news that we got, that we weren't necessarily allowed to tell everybody.
So when, you know, as you start to go through the motions here, where you are, you know, being in a public eye, you're from your perspective and your experiences here, you know, obviously, you know, Brim has other endeavors as well too, and even Kim too, where she's doing voice acting and acting, if, you know, whenever the opportunity arises here. But you're actually, you know, out of the three of you guys, are really the only one that's not in that particular field. You're almost pretty much in one lane virtually the entire time. But have you ever considered walking down either one of those paths where, let me try a little bit of acting, or let me try a little bit of voice acting because this looks like fun, or whatever the case may be?
I mean, I've dabbled in voice acting a little bit.
Okay.
I've had a role in a game called Viking Vengeance.
Oh yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I do remember that now.
I did that. Yeah. I've done a couple of commercials. As far as on camera work, we were working on a show, a television show or a streaming show for GHR years ago that I was going to be in. I don't know. Like acting was just never my thing. Like I never really got comfortable doing it. I never really It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because it was one of the biggest hurdles that I had working with that I've been, kind of dealing with when working with GHR, is sometimes I feel like I'm a bit of an outsider, because, you had Brim, Kim, and Zambo when he was here, Steve, when he was here. Or with the show, I feel like when I say when I was here, people are going to be like, is he dead? No, he's not dead. Very much alive. Very good person. But when Zambo was a part of the show, I felt like a little bit of an outsider, because they all wanted to do voice acting. They're big foodies. They wanted to do on-camera work. And I was never like that. I've always been, I loved talk radio. I loved, I love that's what I wanted to do. And I kind of I literally never thought about doing anything else, so I take advice from Michael Kay, who I'm not a huge fan of, because, he's the Yankee play-by-play voice and I'm a Mets fan. But Michael Kay has said on his radio show a bunch of times that he will take any opportunity given to him if it'll benefit him. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to necessarily just be a sports thing. Any opportunity, like if somebody asks him to do a commercial and he thinks the commercial is going to benefit him, he'll do it. So, I don't consider myself a voice actor or an on-screen actor. I don't particularly like it, but if somebody offers it to me and I think it could be beneficial to me, I'll give it a try. I'll give it the old college try. But no, I very much enjoy my lane. I enjoy being somebody that talks sports or just enjoys podcasting and broadcasting. And I don't really actively look for acting or voice acting roles anymore.
What do you think has changed for you about what? Because you've talked before on more than one episode where you have said that you're not really a pop culture guy. Like that's not really your thing. But I would imagine that along the way, because of the amount of people you guys have met, the things you've been exposed to, being around pop culture on a pretty frequent basis here, talking about various things in relations to that, has something changed about what you may have not liked before or never really give much thought to, that you started to realize, I actually like this more now because of what I've been able to go through with GHR that has exposed me to this, now I'm a fan of this?
I think I've never really considered myself a pop culture guy, because I never really I don't care about any of those crazy award shows or the reality television shows. I watched my dive into reality television was when I watched The Jersey Shore when I was a kid. You know what I mean? I never really got into the
half the world was too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wholeheartedly admit I was a part of the phenomena. I watched it.
Yeah.
But no, I never really cared for the reality shows, the big over the top award shows like the Oscars, the Grammys, the Golden Globes, and all of that. I always just looked at it as, I looked at it from a jaded point of view as a bunch of people that, come off sometimes as better than the average human, or they know better than the average human being. And I never really respected that. I'm like, look, just because you make a lot of money or are really famous because you do a television show doesn't make you any better than any other person that's paying to watch you. You know what I mean? And, to be honest with you, I for a long time, didn't really watch a lot of television. I watched a lot of streamers on YouTube and Twitch, and then literally sports. I literally just watched sports every day. So I was never big into, and all my Twitter, I follow mostly sports accounts on Twitter, mostly sports accounts on Instagram. My life is literally living and dying by athletics, by sports, so I never really felt like somebody that wants to sit down and talk about what Kanye's doing or what the Kardashians are doing or what, what happened at the Golden Globes, other than my favorite thing that I ever saw from the Golden Globes was the last one that Ricky Gervais.
Oh yeah. That was a good one
where he literally
roasted everybody,
hosted everybody, literally had a napalm strike over the entire crowd. It was crazy. But over time I was able to get into it, because I do love the Marvel movies and the MCU. So I was able to talk about that. I love Batman. So I was able to talk about that because comics became so big in pop culture that
Yeah.
okay, I didn't read comics, but I watched a lot of the movies and I watched a lot of the cartoons, so I could pitch in there. I'm a big Disney fan, so when Disney pops in, I can talk about that. So it definitely, I would say GHR definitely opened my eyes to a lot more of pop culture, but not even still, I don't always feel like the biggest pop culture fan, because I don't take it as seriously as a lot of other people do. I look at it more from like this is a bunch of people playing make believe.
So like spectator pretty much is what you're coming from here.
Yes.
Okay.
I feel like sometimes when we're talking, like sometimes I feel like on the show when Brim and Kim are getting very excited, I am both Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets. Like I'm both of them in one person.
I love that analogy. All right. Well, so let's talk about this real quick, because I was actually excited to see that when you, because we talked about it before in the beginning, where when you started getting to your show, Hi, I'm Tom, and talking about sport, I obviously said before that's, I believe, is where you shine. So here's what I'm curious about with you about that. When you talked before about how you let certain outcomes of a game affect you, because of what you're going through now, I'm curious, because you talked about the therapy sessions you've had. Has that also helped you in learning how to deal with the losses of a sport team, of a sport you love? Or is that completely separate from, my daily life routine and my own personal issues that I'm dealing with here? But in relation to sport, I can translate what I've learned through those therapy sessions onto here, so that way I can keep myself in an even keel in that aspect, because from your action alone, I kind of get the feeling that's not the case at all.
Not
okay.
One bit at all. Like therapy has definitely helped my day-to-day and how I feel about myself and how I feel about where I'm going and progressing. No doubt. Like I said, I cannot advocate enough. If you feel like you need therapy, please, please, please. I have no affiliations with any therapy site. Just seek something. But in terms of sports, no, it's I inherited it from my dad. I can't help it. Like I was a miserable wreck when the Mets won 101 games and then lost in the wild card round. That was literally like somebody reached into my chest, pulled my heart out, squeezed it a few times so I watched it beat, and then threw it on the ground. That's literally,
I heard that.
That's literally how it felt. And in the same token, the Giants on Sunday, I was jumping and screaming and freaking out in my upstairs apartment. So, that's not great for anybody living under me. That the Giants went. So no, my emotions when it comes to sports are all over the place. When my teams lose big games, it hurts really, really bad. And when they win big games, it is literally the greatest feeling in the whole. Like, I would imagine I equate my team, like when the Mets made it to the World Series in 2015, I would equate it to the same adrenaline rush as somebody jumping out of a plane. I've never jumped out of a plane before, but I would imagine that the level of adrenaline and excitement you get is somewhere in what I felt in, and the
fear too that comes with that as well, I would imagine too.
Oh yeah, oh my god, dude, the anxiety. Like if anxiety really turned your hair gray, the Mets would have had me turn gray by the time I was 16 years old. You know what I mean? Like I whenever anybody asks me, when we're specifically talking about baseball, what team I root for, my first question is I'm a long-suffering Mets fan, because I literally got the scar. They're not visible, but I got the emotional scars to prove it, and I wear them proudly because they've done a lot of damage to me physically, to me emotionally, and I equate a lot of my pessimistic attitudes towards things. I equate to them because I was the most positive Met fan growing up. Every year I thought they could win the World Series, and every year they let me down. So no, to answer your original question, no, the therapy has yet to help me comb or get a handle on my sports fandom. That is still just batshit crazy. I'm a lunatic.
Do you? So I talked to a comedian by the name of Winston Hodges, who, he's a huge because he grew up in the southern parts of Virginia nearby Blacksburg. He's a huge VTech fan. That's his team. And and I've also talked to a friend of mine too, who's a huge Florida State fan. Like that's his team. Um, and one thing that I've noticed with a lot of like really hardcore, passionate, sports fanatics, especially for the team that they love, the most consistent thing that I've seen from every single one of them, especially in this case with yourself, Winston, and my friend David, when their teams lost, it was like the worst thing to be around because with my friend David, on the other hand, he was, I don't want to come to work today. I was like, I need your help. It was that bad. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Winston, on the other hand, was telling me that, I can be around people, but if you root against my team just to piss me off, I'm gonna hate you for that. And I'm like, that's the level of like, animosity you have towards, whatever the other team is, especially if they're playing for Virginia, against Virginia, I should say. So I understand the obsession. I understand the passion, but I think what I don't really understand is the love, the emotions that come with how occupied that moment can be for somebody who is just distraught by the loss. Because I'm not the biggest sportsman, but there's one team that I love, is Chelsea FC. I love that team. That's out of all the teams that I've supported, that's the one that I've always kept on a pedestal because I believe they are that good. But if they lost, I'll get mad, and in a heartbeat, I'm over it. I move on with my day, and I like to let it go. But it's hard for me to understand for somebody who is holding on to that rage for a lengthy period of time and let that bring their day down. So I guess my question that I was going to ask you was that, are you one of those people that you cannot be around if your team loses, and you have to take a couple of hours or days, whatever the case may be, to really collect yourself, and then, okay, guys, it's good, I can participate in this event here for you guys?
I think it depends on the situation.
Okay.
So like when the Mets lost in the wild card round, this past, like a couple of weeks ago, yes, no, I needed a few days. I needed a few hours, maybe like a day or two to just kind of cool down. And, it's a question that I honestly don't even have a real good answer for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just that like, I grew up in a very sports centric family. Like, I grew up playing baseball since I was 5, talking baseball with my grandpa and my dad since I was a kid. My dad taking us to games, getting together with the family for watching Mets games, for barbecues, or Giants games every Sunday. And it's just that like, I think it's because I grew up in a very sports centered family, and sports has been such a big part of my life and a big part of my family dynamic that, one of the greatest feelings I have in the entire world, literally, I think about it all the time, was won both Giants Super Bowls. But the first one where they beat the undefeated Patriots,
that was a great game.
We were all packed into my whole big family, all packed into my aunt's house, all glued to the television, all of us literally glued to the TV, freaking out at every drop pass, freaking out at every touchdown, at every moment, just tense. But it had my family like really close together. And I just always loved that. Like I always equate my love for sports with, the connection that I had with my entire family, and I chase that high all the time, that high of the Giants Super Bowl. I chase that all the time because I want to feel that again, but I really don't know why it affects me the way it does, other than for me to tell you it just does. I live and die by my sports teams. You know what I mean? The same way, people fall in love with like The Bachelor or all these reality shows and stuff like that. I love sports. It's like, I love the team. One of the best things, like one of the coolest feelings in the world is like going to a baseball game. I actually just did this. I was at game 2 of the wild card series for the Mets, and I was standing there. You could feel just the electricity in the crowd. You could feel the buzz of the crowd, like excited to come watch their team. And when anything good happens, you just turn around and you're in an entire stadium full of people that love the same thing you do. You're just people you've never met before. You're just high five and just excited to be alive and be there in that moment with a bunch of strangers, but you all have the common love for the team that's on the field. You know what I mean? So like, I feel like the people that fell in love with sports secondhand and weren't indoctrinated to it from a young age you're not going to have that same feeling that, that I like that I've had my whole life. You know what I mean? I understand. Like I call it a mental illness, because like I know that it shouldn't affect me the way it does. I totally understand that I am a crazy person to have the Giants losing on Sunday ruin my week until next Sunday. It doesn't ruin the whole week. It ruins a few of the days, but you asked like, how do you get here? I don't know how I got here. It's been a part of my life for so long that I've just been able to deal with it.
What's actually one sporting event, whether it be your teams or any sporting event at any point in time that you would have loved to have been there to witness it, just to be a part of that history? Like any sport, any team, any decade. What would be the one place you would love to be and witness?
I got 3 for you. If that's okay.
That's
is the Super Bowl where they beat. Actually, you know what? We're taking that off because football games I would rather be home with the family because that's so much better than being there at the game.
Yeah, I agree.
The biggest one would probably have to be either games one of the 86 World Series games, probably the Buckner game, probably the Bill Buckner game, because I believe that was game 6 of the World Series, if I remember correctly. It was game 5 or 6. I'm pretty sure it was 6 though. Okay. Because I used to watch, my grandpa had the 86 World Series on VHS, I believe. And I used to watch it all the time when I was a kid because, again, I'm a Mets fan. I don't get much success. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure I've seen them I think I've seen them make the playoffs in the 30 years I've been alive. I think I've seen them make the playoffs 6 times, maybe, so I'd watch the 86 World Series all the time. And just the feeling of watching like my favorite sports franchise win a title, I think would be the coolest thing in the whole world. That's like, I tell my dad all the time that I would trade a Giants Super Bowl for at least one Mets World Series in my life. Like I would,
that's a hard one to do, I would say.
Baseball. Well, baseball's my
right.
Baseball's my life. You know what I mean? Like I've been playing since I was 5. I miss playing it every day. It's just like, man, I like even just thinking about it, like I get very excited and like emotional because I just love the game of baseball. So to see the Mets actually win a World Series like in person would be the greatest thing in the world.
So outside of the Mets or any New York team that you love, what's another a sporting event that you would love to be there to witness? That was such a landmark moment in sports history.
Maybe the Miracle on Ice.
Interesting.
Because I do love hockey, and I thought that was such a I watched the movie like one of my hype things that I would do, especially for hockey playoffs, was like if I wanted to just get super amped and excited, I'd even watch it when I'm playing a sport. If I'm going to play hockey or something, I watch the Miracle, the Herb Brooks speech that oh my God,
Kurt Russell
does. Yeah. That
was a good speech too, by the way.
It was great. It's one of I think, in my opinion, one of the best like movie speeches.
Yeah, same here.
And if I'm being forced to choose something that's not of my own team, it would probably have to be that. It would probably have to be the Miracle on Ice, just because of how big of a moment that was. You know what I mean? You're like deep into the Cold War. It's Russia, which was like a hockey juggernaut at the time, versus the USA, who's like a bunch of startup like college kids.
Yeah.
That would be, I mean, like, look, they still Lake Placid up in New like upstate, they still have the whole thing set up celebrating the Miracle on Ice. You know what I mean? It was a really big moment in sports. So it'd probably be that one. I'd have to pick that one.
Interesting. What's for you? What's a sports film that comes to mind that really does the sport justice and really showcasing the accuracy of the business, the sport itself, the way the players train, the way the players would interact with each other on the field or whatever the case may be? That because the thing is that like I watch like we talked about Miracle. What I loved about that movie, because the director Gavin O'Connor, he had said that we've got to get guys who can play hockey, and I can train them to be actors. Because if you get an actor and then you have to train them to play hockey, it's not going to work. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad he was so cognizant of that to be able to do that, because it made the film beautiful. Because you could see the guys knew how to play, they could adapt, and they were able to make adjustments, and so it worked out well. So I think in that respect, that film does that accurately. But I'm not too knowledgeable about what, apart from maybe like MMA and boxing, but outside of those two sports, what's a film that comes to mind for you that makes you look at the films that is how it's like in real life?
It's probably Miracle. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because because a lot of the movies, like I wouldn't obviously I wouldn't consider Field of Dreams very realistic. The Sandlot's not very realistic. Yeah,
Great
like
movies though.
great, like The Sandlot's literally in my top 10 favorite movie. Like I love that movie.
So do I. I
I
have it on
just
VHS here somewhere here too.
that's all. That's freaking. I want to start a VHS collection, but it's a. Yeah, it's probably Miracle because for the reasons that you said, because they brought
Okay.
in hockey players to be actors, and it kind of felt like you were literally watching a reenactment. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
felt like you were really like watching like a close up version of a real hockey game. You know what I mean? It really felt like I thought that movie did a really good job of making you feel like you're looking into a window of what it was like for the 1980 U.S. men's Olympic hockey team. Like that's just the way that I looked at it. I was like, they did such for a movie that I feel like doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah, I agree too.
I
Yeah.
think they did a really good job of, making that a very believable situation. Like you really like if that movie is exactly how it really happened, I could believe that. You know what I mean? I could believe that all these conversations and pregame speeches and interactions between the players and the coaches, like, and they did a phenomenal job.
What's a sports film that you watch that isn't entirely accurate, but you still love, as far as like what they were able to pull off in terms of story, the games that they played, and again, not accurate, but you still enjoyed? Because you mentioned before, Sandlot's not accurate, but I understand what you mean by that. But outside of that film or Field of Dreams, what's in the film that comes to mind that this is nowhere near as how it actually is in real life, but I enjoy the film because they got the essence of it right, and they are able to make an entertaining movie out of it as well.
Um, well, if I have to omit Sandlot and Field of Dreams,
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna say 42. The Jackie Robinson movie, because
Yeah,
I
I
think they
understand that.
did again. That was another movie that they did a very good job of portraying the life of Jackie Robinson and what it took for. It's obviously it's a movie. There's some fake stuff in there.
Yeah.
They did have to ham it up a little bit and
Yeah.
add a little bit more drama, but probably not much more because of how tense and really extreme of a situation that was. My initial answer would probably be Field of Dreams, just because I feel like that movie does a really good job of highlighting the spirit of baseball. Like baseball above all the other sports, I feel like almost gets into like a mythical realm. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
football, sure, you hear about the history, hear about your Barry Sanders and your your Jerry Rices and stuff like that. But when you start getting into the like baseball prides itself on its history, and a lot of the people that were a part of the game, your Honus Wagner's, Ty Cobbs, who wasn't a great person, but your Willie Mays, your Babe Ruth, like they almost seem like larger than life. They almost seem like fictional characters, like living superheroes to a lot of these people. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
that. I thought Field of Dreams did a really good job of capturing that, of capturing the essence of how baseball is a great sport now, and how it has such a storied and revered past that like I thought Field of Dreams is just such a beautiful movie. You know what I mean? Because it
Yeah.
lets you appreciate the past and the present and the essence of the game. But 42 is just a phenomenal movie because again, they did a really good job of, while exaggerating the situation for a movie, portraying the life and tribulations of Jackie Robinson. Again, if
Yeah.
nobody's seen that movie, go watch 42. It is phenomenal.
What's a sports film that you despise that for whatever those reasons may be, what's the one sportsman you're looking is like that this is either not accurate, horribly portrayed, or terrible story, whatever the case may be.
Mm, off the top of my head, I don't know if I, to be honest with you, I don't know if I have one. I Yeah, I honestly don't know if I got a terrible sports movie to pull for you. I'd have to like look at a list of sports movies that I may have seen. I'm really bad at like remembering a lot of them, but I feel like for the most part, a lot of them wind up being very well done. Or they do like a good job. I don't think I can't pull one right off the top of my head of a movie that I thought was just like, this was terrible. I'm never
Okay.
watching this again.
So, since we're on the topic of baseball here, so do you keep up with the sport outside of MLB, as far as like how other countries like Puerto Rico is known for its baseball. Parts of Central America, Nicaragua that's the national sport. Japan also has great baseball players that come from baseball players that come from Japan to MLB. Actually, since I was talking about Nicaragua, Dennis Martinez, who had thrown the perfect game, I think is what it was called. I have no idea what that meant, but apparently, because my background is Nicaraguan, so I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, but I have no idea what that means. But from what I understood, it was a very monumental moment that he was able to pull off the perfect game.
Perfect game is, I'll give you a hint. I'll tell you what a perfect game is. A perfect game is going one from inning 1 to inning 9, not giving up a hit and not even walking a person, nobody gets on by an error. That when you look at the scoreboard, it is literally zeros across the entire scoreboard. No hits, no runs, no errors. Everything's clean. So they call that a perfect game. And they are very, very, very like one of the rarest things in baseball. You'd be lucky if you saw one ever again.
So were you familiar with that particular?
That wouldn't know that I'm not not familiar with. No.
Okay, so again, that concept of the perfect game, that was all new to me because I didn't really understand the importance that baseball had. It really is with pop. I mean, if it wasn't for pop culture, films, I don't know if I would have ever been as interested. I'm not saying that I'm not interested. I am interested, but nowhere near your level. But I certainly do appreciate the level of impact that the sport does have, because even as a spectator from the out, from looking at the outside in, even I know who almost all these players are.
Yeah.
Even the controversy that comes with it as well too. But the fact of the matter is that I agree with you 100% that the sport definitely does have a really major impact here in the States, especially. But I didn't realize the impact that it has around the world as well too. Like I'm talking about Nicaragua, Puerto Rico is known for its baseball. I believe Dominican Republic as well too. Japan,
Dominican, yeah, no, absolutely. During the lockdown when there was no sports going on, I was watching the KBO, which is the Korean Baseball League, because it was the only sports that was happening at the time.
Okay.
I don't keep up with a lot of the out of the country stuff. I kind of keep it to Major League Baseball. When we're talking about guys coming over from other countries, like coming to the majors or getting signed, out of Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic or Venezuela, I think is another really big one.
Yeah.
Then I'll do a little bit more research, but for the most part, I stick to Major League Baseball, only because it's sometimes hard because, I don't know exactly where to go to find a lot of this stuff. And it's just like, it can be time consuming just trying to dive into every single league. And, there's baseball all over the place. It makes me happy because, all I hear all the time is baseball's dying. Nobody's playing, baseball's dying. When, I see that there's more kids going to play Little League. There's kids all over the world playing baseball. And it's just a great feeling because it's just such a awesome game. It's a fun game. It can be a little slow at times, I will admit, but it's just such a fun atmosphere, beautiful game. And, it's literally my favorite. Baseball's been my life since I was 5 years old. And I just love to see it.
Do you keep up with college teams as well too? Because I mean, a lot of them get recruited from college to go into MLB. So do you also keep up with that as well to get an understanding of like, okay, so I know this person's capability. So when they sign on to this team, I know what to expect out of them.
after I usually do that like around like MLB draft time. I'll start looking into players that the Mets have drafted or other teams have drafted. I'll just like look them up and see how they are, because no, I don't. It's very much like college football. Like I don't really keep up with college football simply because there's just so many teams. It's just so much to really hone in on and focus in on. And while I love sports like to death, I love playing them, I love watching them. It's amazing. It can be really overwhelming, especially when I'm trying to just work and like, live my everyday life. Like I can't, like, I love sports and it's my life, but I can't have it be my whole life because I got work to do. I got a girlfriend. So it's hard to keep up with a lot of that stuff. So no, I for the most part stick to pro sports like the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, and the MLB. And some college here and there, but I'll do my homework when I have to.
What's actually, when it comes to sports for you, you talked before about how people were saying that baseball is dying and that it's kind of like a back burner in a lot of ways. I agree with you 100%. I don't think it is that because right down the street from where I live is a park, and quite literally every day there is always a baseball minor league, not minor league game, little league game. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then even now, because I live out here in Gastonia, which is like just outside of Charlotte, there is a new minor league stadium that they had built a little less than a year ago, and that looks beautiful. They hold other events out there as well too. So clearly, in my opinion, I don't agree with that notion behind the people say that the sport is kind of waning down. I think it's the polar opposite. I think in fact it's actually growing more because the fact that there's a whole new facility that's built in this little town that I live in here, which is state of the art. Especially when you go inside, like it's very reminiscent of like the major league games, obviously a little more minuscule, but it has that same kind of feeling behind it because I checked out the Nats play out in Southeast a while back. And I remember just being overwhelmed, like how many people had showed up. Because when I was growing up in the Northern Virginia, because I'm originally from Northern Virginia, but I've been around Southeast DC, it was not the place that it was when I was growing up that it is now when I saw the Nats play. So clearly, the sport has brought in something, at least in that part of the area where before it was considered to be a bad neighborhood. Now it's like thriving. So I'm noticing a lot of the changes that the sport has made in hindsight now that you brought that up here. But when it comes to sports in general for yourself, do you feel like if there's any sort of negative impact that you've noticed more in this era that never occurred before, that's starting to come out more that becomes a bit of a nuisance for yourself?
I wouldn't say. I think the biggest nuisance, the biggest problem with sports is just like how pricey it could be to appreciate the games. You know what I mean? I think that's a really big problem that baseball, football, and hockey, like all sports, are going to feel at some point because, again, I don't want to come off as this person that's saying, oh, these players are making too much money. Because no, I mean, like, look, the owners of these teams make a lot of money off of this players' production. The players, I feel like, should be compensated for that. So no, I don't want you to think I'm one of those people yelling at players, being like, "All right, you shouldn't be making millions to play a game." No, you're good at what you do. You're professional. You should get paid what you're worth. But in the same token, to go to a Mets game, to go to one of the Mets playoff games. I was fortunate enough that somebody had an extra ticket to let me go, so I was able to go. If I wanted to buy a ticket to one of those playoff games to sit all the way up in the nosebleeds, like where I'd need binoculars to see the players, so great seats, you get to see everything, so great seats. It was going to cost me like $125, like $125. Doesn't seem like an astronomical amount of money, but when you're, if you're a family of four, you want to take your kids to a game, or you want to take your family to a game. Especially coming off of a pandemic, when money could potentially be tight, it's hard. You know what I mean? Like it's not necessarily all that cheap. And then you factor in concessions into that, where you're going to spend like $20 on a burger on a hot dog and a soda, maybe more, probably more than that, almost probably like close to
$20 with just the burger itself.
Just the burger itself. You know what I mean? So I think if anything, that's the negative impact that sports is going to have, is just that like, you're going to end up pricing people out. Like people are just going to not be able to go because they can't afford it. So I think that's a really scary avenue that baseball, football, hockey, and basketball are going down because, it's insane. It's insane. You know what I mean? Like sports is supposed to be something that brings people together, and people should be able to just go and turn off their brains for a little while and just go enjoy a mindless sport and enjoy themselves and have a good time. And it's hard to do that when, you got to worry about, can I go buy tickets to the Met game or can I pay my electric bill?
Hmm.
I hope that answers your question.
It does answer the question, but I'm just curious about, how you, because so growing up, you've been able to go to a lot of sporting events. And I'm sure a lot of it during those times, especially when you were younger, you probably didn't think about the price because your parents had paid for it and you just enjoyed, going to the events. But as you started getting older and then you were paying for your own tickets and you started noticing, going to those events under those circumstances, did something change for you about how, not necessarily how you look at the sport, but how the experience to getting to the event that changed for you as a grown up, as it was for a child, for yourself? Like, do you notice something had changed for you along the way once you started doing that yourself and you realized, man, this is not what I thought it was, but it is what it is. But once I'm inside the game, and once I'm inside the stadium, I'm going to watch the game. And I don't really care. But I'm wondering if you have a little bit of perception about how things may have changed for you as you got older, where you started doing that for yourself and experiencing the differences as you were a child.
Well, I definitely go to less games than I would have liked to. You know what I mean? Just because of scheduling and financially. You know what I mean? I can't go to every game. I mean, the Mets actually. I'm considering this because this is the craziest deal I've ever heard in my life. So the Mets, at least last year, they might be rolling it out next year. I don't remember exactly how it worked, but they were doing it's called the Amazing Pass. It's like $75 a month, which is a lot of money, but it was $75 a month. I think it came to about $500 for the season, and you got season tickets, except it was standing room only. So you can just pay the $75 a month. You can go to any game you wanted, and you just get standing room only. You could just sit and watch the game. So I considered that, but no, I definitely looked at it a little differently because it is harder to get to games with the prices going up and getting crazy. But when I step foot into Citi Field specifically, that is my happy place. That is just the second I walk into Citi Field and I see the field itself and the green grass and just the environment, I'm 6 years old again. And all of the anxiety that I may have had, before I got in, is gone. I literally just everything goes away and I'm just focused in on baseball and I'm just so happy. It almost makes me appreciate it a little bit more because, I did have to spend a little bit extra money to get in there. I don't get to go to as many games. So when I do get the opportunity to go in, it's almost special. It's wow, I'm here. I'm where I love to be. This is my favorite place in the world, is Citi Field, sitting down to watch the Mets hopefully win a baseball game. It's just, I feel like I'm not even describing it well personally because of the feeling that I get when I just get to sit down and enjoy a baseball game.
So if the Mets were to win the World Series, you think you would cry?
Not even a question. Absolutely. 100%. The minute I would probably start crying before the final out is called, but the minute the final out is recorded, I will be a sobbing mess because it's I've been waiting my whole life for that one moment. It's just, I think about that all the time. I think I've told Kim that before. I'd be I just want to let you know, if and when the Mets do win the World Series, I will be so unbelievably happy and overcome with emotions that I will 1000% be crying because, I've always said I want to be able to experience a World Series with my dad and my brothers. I wanted to experience a World Series with my grandpa, but unfortunately, he's got Alzheimer's and that does that thing. I'm not trying to bring this thing down, but that was my thing. Is the Mets are my team. The Mets are literally my whole life. And if they won a World Series, it would be the happiest crying I have ever done in my entire life.
So you talked before about how you felt like some of the worst fans out there, especially where you mentioned the Yankees fans are being the worst along with the Cowboys. What experiences have you had in going to games or being around other people where opposing teams or just other people, just other teams and just in general, that you've noticed for yourself? Because if if you talk with a Yankees fan, I mean, obviously there might be some banter back and forth, but I mean, I would imagine for the most part, it's pretty respectable. You know, there's teasing, but there's no one's crossing the line. But I'm wondering if you have seen, which I'm sure you have, but if you've seen something where you realize that this has gone too far, like there's no need for all this nonsense here.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, like when I say that Yankee fans are the worst, it's only because I grew up in the mid 90s and early 2000s. So I grew up with the Yankee fans that were used to the dynasty Yankees, the core four, just winning championship. And all I ever had to hear is, oh, Mets stands for my entire team sucks. Just, telling me how stupid it is that I'm a Mets fan, how they're always going to be terrible. Like, and I wouldn't even say anything. Like they would just overtly see I'm a Mets fan and just decide to attack me for some reason. And it's like, this isn't necessary. I feel like we could all coexist. We don't even affect each other. You're in the American League. I'm in the National League. Why do we have to butt heads so much? But, they do. So I innately don't like them. But no, I don't like when it gets physical, because sometimes people try to get like, sometimes I consider myself a crazy sports fan, but when you start getting like personal and start attacking people personally, attacking players on social media personally, or other fans personally, then I have an issue. There's for a while you couldn't go to an Islander Ranger game without seeing some kind of fist fight. It's like, come on, guys, we're literally like, sports is supposed to be an escape from the world, an escape from your problems. You're supposed to come and enjoy, again, escape from it all, turn your brain off and just enjoy a game. We don't got to get violent. We don't got to start beating the crap out of each other because you don't like the team I root for and I don't like the team you root for. You know what I mean? Like there doesn't need to be this animosity that there always is. I'm cool with a little, lighthearted back and forth, ribbing each other, trash talk. That's all fine and good. I love that. That's great. But when you start getting like super personal or like starting to get into like fist fights about it, it's it's stupid. I was very happy. It's probably like 10 years ago now, might even be a little more than that. I went to a Mets Phillies game in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, for those of you that don't know, has a horrible reputation of their fans. They threw batteries at Santa Claus. You know what I mean? I think it was Santa Claus.
They also have I think at one point, didn't they have like an actual courtroom where they would just find people and then they would send them to
pretty sure in the bottom of Lincoln Financial Field, there's a holding cell or something like that.
Yeah. That's what I heard too.
So I went to a Mets Phillies game with a group of the big group was my family. And we all went in Mets gear, and I was expecting to get harassed, and luckily we didn't. We didn't really get it too bad. I think it's because the Mets and the Phillies both sucked at the time, so nobody really cared all that much. But it's part of the sport. You know what I mean? People get super passionate, and sometimes people let that passion get the best of them. And I don't know. I'm somebody that gets angry. I get upset about sports when my teams lose, when people attack my team, but I never, ever felt like I need to get personal and attack you personally because of your fandom or the teams you root for.
What's the ideal scenario for the Mets to be in the World Series where I mean, obviously from winning, but like so I'm assuming that American and National, they're the ones that play against each other in the finals, right?
Yep.
So ideally, if it's the Mets against the Yankees and the Mets win, close, it's a shootout, if you will, or by a landslide, do you think that victory under those circumstances would be even more overwhelming for you, like just to like prove a point, just to stick it, like, you said we suck and we beat you. Not only did we beat you, but we beat you convincingly. We slammed the door in your face, and there's nothing you could have done about it. Because why? Because we were the better team. Like under those circumstances, you think you would have been like, apart from crying, but do you really think that there's something more out of that you would get under those circumstances?
I would cry and throw up all at the same time. That would be amazing. I'm not going to pick and choose whoever the Mets beat in the World Series.
Right.
I'm cool with, you know what I mean? I will be losing my mind because it's just something that I always wished I would see. For a while, I never thought I was going to see, but no, I'd be lying to you. If the Mets beat the Yankees in the World Series, I would be losing my mind. I know Yankee fans would do their typical, oh, we have 27 championships and you got 3, they would still play the little brother card. But no, it'd be the greatest feeling in the world if they just went in and they beat the Yankees, especially if they like beat them in the Bronx. Man, would it be Would it be? I
Be a
honestly can't
long
even.
ride home from
I
there,
don't.
though.
Yeah, what I don't even know if I could describe to you because I've never experienced it. You know what I mean? The last
Right.
time the Mets and Yankees met in the World Series was 2000, and luckily I was still young enough to where that didn't hurt too bad. But
Mm.
yeah, if the Mets beat the Yankees in the World Series, it would be.
Did you cry then too?
I don't totally remember, but I remember going to school was not fun. Going
Mm.
to being a child in school when the Mets lost to the Yankees in the Subway Series was very rough, very very rough. Again, adds to why I don't like Yankee fans is because of my
Right.
experience around then.
So when you're thinking about these sporting events here, obviously you mentioned baseball being like the pinnacle for you, but is there something that you is there like an actual a sporting event that you would like to go to that maybe you don't really you're not I'm not saying you're not a fan of, but just to experience, like, I would love to go see this in a live environment because it sounds interesting. I'm not a fan of it because I've never looked into it, but I think it'd be a fun experience just to go and be a part for one time.
Oh, I was actually that's funny you asked that. I was just talking to Kim about that and a couple of my cousins about this. I want to go to the U.S. Open really bad.
Really?
Yeah, I used to I played tennis a little bit when I was a kid,
Okay.
and going to Mets games. Arthur Ashe is where they hold the U.S. Open is right across the parking lot. Like it's literally you could see the U.S. where they hold the U.S. Open from Citi Field. So I don't know. I was always a little into tennis when I was a kid, and I was never a huge fan. Like I couldn't name you anybody other than like Roger Federer
Or
and
Andre Agassi.
Andre Agassi and the
Yeah.
Williams sisters. Other than that, I don't really follow tennis at all. But just to experience the event of the U.S. Open, I'm going to try and at least get tickets next year.
Okay. Um, I shared this before on social media, and I said this to Kim, and I've told Brim this as well too. But you know, I've said it that I've always dreamed of being able to work with you all in some capacity because when I first heard of the show, because of my friend Steve had booked an interview with Brim at the time, a little over 2 years ago at this point. I looked into Brim's work background and looked into it with GHR, and I'm like, this show is great. I would love to do this here after, like, I think the first couple episodes I came across, and it always stuck with me. Now, I don't believe in destiny. I don't believe things happen for a reason, but I was very grateful that when Brim had reached out and said, "Hey, I remember you do these things. Would you be interested in doing this? Um, this is what we need you to do, and I think you'd be perfect for it." Getting that call from him, getting that text from him as well too, like it was one of those things where there was like this overwhelming feeling of like this is actually happening. So because of that call that I've gotten from Brim and him letting me know the news about working with you guys, it it changed a lot about how I look at life in general to a degree where I started understanding and appreciating the things that I did want that I've had in my head for a period of time, and that actually came true.
Mhm.
And then being able to converse with you in this capacity here, and with Kim and with Brim on a few occasions as well, because I always wanted to be able to have establish some sort of rapport where how we click with each other. Because I felt like when I listened to you guys talk, like I remember at the time thinking I can click with these guys because they're doing something that I love, and I want to be able to be a part of that because I love how they go about it. That chemistry I always felt like was always there, and it's still there to this day as well too. I felt like it was never lost, even though you guys lost a team member here, but I always felt like the chemistry was always there, and you guys still kept that consistent, which is a very, very hard thing to do. And because of that, I think you guys are one of the best that do it out there. And I believe all the attention you guys are getting is well deserved. And I hope it keeps growing from there as well too. So for me to have this conversation with you, it does mean a lot to me because I get to just sit down and chit chat with you. And I would love to have more of these conversations. And I've told this to Kim as well too. And I think I may have told Brim as well that I would love to come up there one day and just watch to see how the engine works, because I want to see the inner workings and see how all the pieces are put together, all the cogs in place here. And I think that to me would be the most interesting, because that's where I really think the magic really does happen, apart from the conversation, but really how everything gets put together. And when I hear you talk about what you go through, that's the part where I think I learned the most about you as a person and what you go through to have to deal with that, especially with some of the hurdles you have to go through along the way. That to me, I think is really what people get to learn about how the team really works under those circumstances, apart
Yeah.
from talking about, tell me about the time you talk with this guest here. And that's fine, but that's not really what I'm more interested in. I'm more interested in about behind the scenes and how you guys deal with the highs and the lows. So I'm extremely grateful. I can't thank you enough for the conversation. This is something that I've looked forward to. So and to be frank with you, when you had to postpone, I was like, fuck, I really wanted to talk to him tomorrow, but it turned.
I apologize.
No.
Yeah.
Don't. You don't need to apologize. I understand the circumstances, but it was one of those things I was really looking forward to, because I wanted to be able to have a conversation with each one of you guys one on one, and have the opportunity to just, to have that connection, if you will. So, if anything, I want to say thank you again for giving me the time, sharing me your stories, and being upfront as well too, which is something that I really did appreciate. And most importantly, I think that, when you said that you're 100% yourself, on your show, on GHR, your show, and now here in this conversation, I agree 100%, because you have that same consistency, which I told you before. I think you keep an even keel about yourself, that I've noticed that is, I'm not gonna say it's hard to pull off, but it certainly gives the impression that what you see is what you get. And that's what I truly appreciate about everybody that I've come across on the show here so far. So I'm not sure if you want to say anything in closing for yourself about anything that you can maybe want to announce that people can be on the lookout here for, because by the time this episode uploads, it'll probably be 2 weeks from now. But if anything you want to give out a shout out to, or anything you want to say in the meantime to close out here for yourself.
No, I mean, look, I appreciate you even giving me the time to come on and talk to you. You know what I mean? Like I am so unbelievably grateful for where GHR has brought me, and how I even got here. I'm grateful that we have you being a part of the show, simply because I love being able to work with people that put out good content, or passionate about their content, can have fun doing this, because like I said before earlier in the show, sometimes when you're at this for as long as you have been, it's hard to, as long as I have been, or anybody's has been in this business, it's hard to just keep that fun and keep that joy. Sometimes the downs get really down, but hearing people put together content that is good, and they're passionate about and enjoy, kind of brings some of that fun back. You know what I mean? Kind of recharges it, so like, that's why it was a breath of fresh air when you were able to come on and do stuff, because it just was another person that was like doing something that they loved, and you can hear it. You know what I mean? It's one of the things that I say in our podcasting classes that we usually do, where it was one of the first things that I learned at CSB is that even though this is an audio medium, a lot of people do YouTube now, but if you're just strictly audio, which is what we do, you can tell if somebody's enjoying it. You can tell if somebody's smiling behind the mic, or if somebody's down behind the mic, and it affects the content. You know what I mean? And it's great when you get to listen to people that are passionate about what they do and love what they do, and it helps bring me back to find that spark that I had. You know what I mean? So dude, I appreciate you bringing me on here. I appreciate being able to have this conversation. I appreciate you being a part of GHR now. Whenever you want to come up and experience what it's like in the studio, I mean, just let us know. The door's always open, man. You're part of the GHR family. So that's always there. And I don't really have much else other than, telling people to listen to GHR every Thursday, 7 p.m. Hi, I'm Tom podcast goes up on my YouTube channel. Hi, I'm Tom. Whenever I upload episodes, I might change the name, but we'll see what happens.
I actually like that name. I think it actually works really well.
I appreciate it. I had a list of stuff, just writing down, just writing down names, and I don't know. Hi, I'm Tom came to my head, but and I also appreciate you feeling that I'm a genuine person, because I'm, again, like I mentioned before, I'm not an actor. I don't put on a face. I don't know how to do that. I've never done it once really in my life. I don't know anything else other than to just be myself. So whatever you see on this show, GHR, my podcast, any interview that I do, I am the same person in that setting than I am walking down the street. If you were to just see me, I got no problem being myself, and I don't know how to do it any other way. I don't like fakeness. I don't like when things seem unreal. So I try to be as real as humanly possible, and I will continue to do that for as long as I possibly can.
So on that note, for the cameras, I'm going to say thank you again, and I would love to do this again because
anytime.
This was a fun conversation to have, and there's actually a lot more that I want to delve into as well too. But I'm sure we can do that for another day here. But for the cameras again, I want to say thank you, and until next time, cheers.
So long, my friend.